Enki sent 3 types. Not 1. Not 2. 3. The first, you would see coming. A figure draped in the skin of a carp. Fish head over human head. Human feet beneath a fish tail. You could not mistake it for anything that belonged in your world. The second, you would hear first. Wings spreading across the sky above you. A bird's head turning toward you. Eyes that were not human. Standing nearly 2 meters tall at the entrance to the king's throne room. You would fall to your knees. The third. You would not notice at all. Bearded. Wingless. The same height as the men around it. The same robes. The same posture. It would sit at the king's right hand. It would speak with the king's advisors. It would walk through the markets of Babylon without a single person turning their head. And after the flood, when the first 2 types went back into the Abzu, the third type stayed. And what the cuneiform texts describe about what happened next is the part nobody talks about. Welcome to the Shadow Ancestral. This is episode 14. If you watched episode 13, you already know about Oans. The first Apkallu. The one who came from the sea and did not eat. Tonight we go deeper into the documented record of all 3 types. What made each one different? What each one was assigned to do? And what happened after the flood, when the categories began to blur? Every claim in this episode is sourced from museum collections, peer-reviewed academic papers, and cuneiform texts that have been studied by Assyriologists for over a century. Subscribe right now if you are new here. Before we go further, understand something about this channel. Every claim we make is sourced. Every tablet we reference is real. Every story we tell is verified. There is no other channel doing this at this level. Subscribe. And find out why. Now, the 3 types. Before we describe the 3 types, you need to understand how we know they existed. There are 3 independent ancient sources that document the Apkallu. The spoken past academic article on Mesopotamian Apkallu, drawing on the full body of Assyriological research, documents them precisely. Source 1. The Bit Meseri series. A Neo-Assyrian incantation text preserved on cuneiform tablets. The oldest preserved list of the 7 pre-flood sages. Identified by Assyriologist Reichel Borger as belonging to the 3rd tablet of the series. First published by scholar E. Reiner in 1961. Source 2. The Uruk list of kings and sages. A cuneiform tablet dated to 164 or 165 BCE. Catalog number W200307. Which pairs each of the 7 sages with the antediluvian king they advised. Source 3. The Babyloniaca of Berossus. A Babylonian priest writing around 290 BCE. Preserving the tradition for Greek audiences under the name of the first sage, Oans. The spoken past article states, each source agrees on the number 7, and on the basic sequence, though the names vary between lists. 3 independent sources. Spanning over 500 years. All confirming the same 7 sages. All confirming the same basic sequence. And together, documenting 3 distinct physical types that were not interchangeable. Not variations of the same being. 3 separate categories. 3 separate roles. 3 separate assignments. And only one of them looked like a human being. Type 1. The Fish-Cloaked beings. The Samizdat academic analysis, drawing on Wigerman's 1992 landmark monograph Mesopotamian Protective Spirits, describes them as the original Babylonian Apkallu, as described by Berossus. Their physical form was specific and consistent across every source that documents them. A humanoid figure. Wearing the skin of the parata fish, the carp, draped from the top of the head down over the shoulders. The fish head sitting directly above the human head beneath it. The timeless myths documentation of the Apkallu describes the construction of this appearance. The head of the fish is directly attached to and merged with the human head. Not a separate hat. Not a costume worn loosely. Merged. And the Berossus description, preserved in Livius.org, records what Oannes looked like when he came ashore. The whole body of the animal was like that of a fish. And had under a fish's head another head, human. And also feet below, similar to those of a man, subjoined to the fish's tail. This type emerged from water. Consistently. Every account. Every source. They came from the Persian Gulf. From the Erythraean Sea. From wherever the Apsu connected to the surface world. And they went back into the water every night. Their specific assignment, documented in the cuneiform texts, was teaching. Writing. Mathematics. Law. Agriculture. Architecture. Temple construction. City planning. The Grokipedia entry on the Apkallu, citing cuneiform scholarship, documents their task in precise language. The correct execution of the plans of heaven and earth. Not military. Not political. Not religious in the sense of leading worship. The correct execution of the plans. Engineers. Architects. Teachers. Sent from the Apsu with a specific curriculum, and a specific physical appearance that made it impossible to pretend they were anything other than what they were. Type 2. The bird-headed beings. The Samis. Documentation, drawing on the Bit Meseri series, identifies this type by name. The Nisroch bird Apkallu. Their physical description is the most immediately striking of the three types. Winged. Bird-headed. Nearly 2 meters tall. In their right hand, a mullalukon. The instrument of exorcism and liberation of sin. In their left hand, a bandudu bucket. Used in purification rituals. The Samis. Academic analysis documents their function precisely. Mixed feature exorcists and creatures of protection created by the god Ea. They traditionally served as advisors to kings. This is a critical distinction from Type 1. Type 1, the fish-cloaked beings, were teachers of civilization. They worked with the population. With farmers. With builders. With ordinary human beings. Type 2, the bird-headed beings, worked with kings. Advisors. At the highest levels of power. Inside the palace. At the throne room entrance. At the king's right hand. The Grokipedia entry documents this royal association explicitly. Neo-Assyrian monarchs like Ashurbanipal, 668 to 627 BCE, propagated their connection to the bird Apkallu in inscriptions, boasting mastery of Apkallu-derived lore to legitimize conquests and administration. This was not symbolic. Assyrian kings specifically claimed that their authority derived from their connection to the bird Apkallu tradition. That the wisdom they possessed, the ability to govern, came through this lineage of bird-headed advisors. And the physical evidence, documented by the spoken past article, confirms this relationship was taken with complete seriousness. The Bit Meseri ritual texts contain specific instructions for making and burying clay Apkallu figurines inside the structure of a house or palace. The texts are remarkably precise about placement. 7 fish-cloaked. 7 bird-headed. Placed at doorways. At the head of beds. Beneath palace floors. Because the bird-headed beings, though they had returned to the Abzu, could be invoked through accurate representation. And the king who had their figurines beneath his floor had their protection above it. Type 3. The spoken past article, drawing on Wigerman's analysis, describes this type with a precision that makes it the most significant of the three. The second type shows fully human figures, bearded and wingless, which Wigerman associated with the post-flood sages, the Umanu or craftsman scholars. Bearded. Wingless. Fully human in appearance. No fish skin. No bird head. No wings. No aquatic origin visible in the body. The Samizdat analysis adds a critical academic qualification about this type. This wingless type is thought by Wigerman to be sages before the flood, an identification based on a possible but unfounded connection with the Sumerian names of those early sages. Their human appearance might be more appropriate for mortal sages who lived after the flood. Read that carefully. Wigerman, the leading scholar on Apkallu iconography, is not certain whether this type represents pre-flood divine sages or post-flood human sages. Because they look identical. That uncertainty is not a weakness in the scholarship. It is the point. The third type of Apkallu was either a divine being that chose to appear fully human, or a human being that had inherited enough of the Apkallu nature to be included in the category. Both possibilities are documented in the cuneiform record. And both of them lead to the same disturbing conclusion. At some point in the history of the ancient world, there were beings walking among humans that you could not identify by looking at them. You had to know what to look for. And the one thing to look for, as we covered in episode 13, was whether they ate. 3 types. 3 assignments. 3 levels of visibility. And after the flood, something happened that the tablets document with extraordinary specificity. The categories began to merge. Subscribe to the Shadow Ancestral right now. There is no other channel doing this at this level. Every episode is sourced. Every claim is verified. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Now, what happened after the flood? The 7 pre-flood Apkallu went back into the Abzu when the flood came. As we documented in episode 13. But the cuneiform texts, documented across multiple academic sources, describe something that happened after the flood receded. Something that should not have been possible. For more Apkallu appeared. Not 7. Not divine. 4. And these 4 were different from everything that had come before. The demonology fandom documentation of the Apkallu, drawing on cuneiform sources, records their names. Nungal Pirigaldem, Pirigal Numgal, Pirigalapsu, and Lunana. And their description is the most significant detail in the entire Apkallu record. They were part human and part Apkallu. The cuneiform text state explicitly. Lunana was only 2/3 Apkallu. 2/3. Not fully divine. Not fully human. A measured fraction. The Welf-Dietrich analysis of the Apkallu documents this precisely. They were part human and part Apkallu. They committed various sins that angered the gods. The Apkallu and human beings, documented in the cuneiform texts, were apparently capable of conjugal relationships. And the children of those relationships were the 4 post-flood Apkallu. Part human. Part something older than human. With divine knowledge encoded in their nature, but also with human weakness encoded alongside it. They committed transgressions. They angered the gods. And eventually, like the earlier Apkallu, they were banished back to the waters. Here is where the documented scholarship reaches a conclusion that most mainstream sources choose not to amplify. Scholar A.D. Kilmer, cited in the Samizdat academic analysis, suggested a direct connection between the Apkallu tradition and the Nephilim of Genesis 6 verse 4. The grounds for this suggestion, documented in the Samizdat article, are 3 specific parallels. First, the Apkallu lived immediately before and after the flood. The Nephilim appear in Genesis immediately before the flood. Second, some of the post-Diluvian Apkallu are described as angering various gods. The Nephilim in Genesis are described as causing moral corruption that preceded the flood. Third, and this is the most significant, some post-flood Apkallu are described as being of human descent. 1. Lunana, was only 2/3 Apkallu. The Nephilim in Genesis are described as the offspring of divine beings and human women. The scholars who have examined this connection, including researchers cited in the Archaeohistory's documentation, note a further parallel. Gilgamesh, the mythical king of Uruk, is described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human. And his wisdom, his ability to build the great city walls, came from the 7 sages. 2/3 divine. 1/3 human. The same fraction that is used to describe Lunana, the last of the post-flood Apkallu. The Samizdat analysis is careful about the limits of this connection. It is hard to see how these figures can be directly related to the Nephilim, since their identities and attributes are so different. The scholars do not claim they are the same beings. What they document is that the same framework exists in both traditions. Divine beings crossing into the human world, producing offspring of mixed nature. Those offspring committing transgressions, being removed from the world. In the Sumerian record, banished to the Apsu. In Genesis, destroyed by the flood. Both traditions describing the same pattern, in the same sequence, in the same time period. And the Sumerian version, pressed into clay before the Genesis account was written, names them, and measures the fraction of their divine nature to the last third. The transgressions of the post-flood Apkallu are documented in a late Babylonian list referenced in the Samizdat analysis. The most specific, and the most extraordinary, belongs to the first of the 4. Nungalpirigaldem. The late Babylonian list, cited in the Samizdat academic paper on correspondences between Apkallu and Nephilim, records his transgression as follows. He brought down Ishtar from heaven. He brought down Ishtar from heaven. Not a metaphor. Not a symbolic statement. A specific action. Recorded as a transgression. The goddess Ishtar, the most significant female deity in the entire Babylonian pantheon, was brought down from her realm by one of the hybrid Apkallu. The same list records that Nungalpirigaldem also made a harp decorated with bronze and lapis. A divine transgression. And a technological innovation. In the same account. By the same being. This is the pattern the texts document across all 4 post-flood Apkallu. They acted beyond their boundaries. They did things the fully divine pre-flood Apkallu had not done. Because they were not fully divine. Their human nature, the fraction that Lunana carried at only 2/3 Apkallu, gave them human impulses alongside divine knowledge. And the combination of divine knowledge with human impulse angered the gods. They were banished. Sent back to the waters they came from. And after them, came the first completely human advisors. Called the Umanu. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, was the first king to have had an entirely human advisor. The chain was complete. Divine Apkallu before the flood. Hybrid Apkallu after the flood. Human Umanu, after the hybrids were banished. And with each transition, the knowledge became a little less. The connection to the Apsu a little more distant. The divine wisdom a little more diluted. Until all that remained, was what the hybrid sages had managed to pass on before they transgressed and were removed. Here is what the Spoken Past article, the most thorough modern academic analysis of the Apkallu, identifies as the central function of all 3 types. Not teaching. Not protecting. Not advising kings. All 3 of those were functions. But the purpose behind all 3 was something the Spoken Past article describes with one precise phrase. Keeping what had been given. The knowledge required to build and maintain a civilization, according to the Sumerian belief documented in the cuneiform record, was not invented by human beings through trial and error. It was given. By Enki. Through the Apkallu. In a specific sequence. With specific types assigned to specific levels of society. Type 1, Fish-Cloaked, gave the knowledge to the people. To the farmers and builders and ordinary human beings. Type 2, Bird-Headed, gave the knowledge to the kings. To the rulers who would shape the political order of civilization. Type 3, Human Form, preserved the knowledge across the transition from divine to human. The bearded, wingless sages who looked like everyone else, who could sit among the scholars and the priests and the court advisors without anyone knowing what they actually were the bridge. The Spoken Past article states this directly. The scribes who copied astronomical tables, the exorcists who performed the Bit Meseri ritual, and the architects who carved Apkallu into throne room walls, were all participants in the same act of stewardship. They were keeping what had been given. The three types were not three separate missions. They were three layers of a single transmission system. From the divine source, through three different channels, to every level of human society. And when all three types were gone, when the divine Apkallu returned to the Apsu, when the hybrid Apkallu were banished, when the human Umanu were all that remained, the keeping continued. Because that was the one instruction that was never transgressed. The knowledge had been given. And it had to be kept. Every detail we have covered tonight is documented in physical objects you can see right now. The Grokopedia entry on the Apkallu, drawing on cuneiform scholarship and archaeological records, documents the physical evidence precisely. Excavations at Mesopotamian sites such as Nimrud, 9th to 7th centuries BCE, uncovered clay figurines of fish or bird-headed Apkallu buried as foundation deposits beneath buildings, intended to ward off evil and ensure structural sanctity. All three types. Fish-cloaked. Bird-headed. Human form. All three buried. Under floors. Under doorways. Under the thresholds between one space and another. The Bit Meseri texts, which specified exactly where each figurine should be placed, treated the presence of these figurines as functional. Not decorative. Not symbolic in the vague sense. Functional. As if the type of Apkallu placed at a doorway determined what that doorway was protected from. The fish-cloaked type, placed near water access points. Near wells. Near rivers. The bird-headed type, placed at primary entrances. Throne rooms. Council chambers. The places where power was exercised. The human form type, placed at the head of beds. At the most personal and most vulnerable location in any home. Where you slept. Where you were defenseless. Where you had no idea what might sit beside you in the dark. The human form Apkallu was placed there because it was the one type that could exist in that space without being detected. The one that looked like you. The one you would not notice. Placed there to protect you, from whatever else might also not be noticed. The Era epic, one of the most important Babylonian literary texts, asks a question in present tense. Where are the 7 sages of the Apsu, the pure parrot of fish, who just as their lord Ea have been endowed with sublime wisdom? Not, where were they? Where are they? The fish-cloaked type, in the Apsu. Behind Enki's sealed door. As we documented in episodes 8 and 11. The bird-headed type, their figurines buried in the palaces of Assyrian kings. Their images carved into throne room walls. Their influence documented in the inscriptions of Ashurbanipal. And the human form type. The tablets do not say where they went. The fish-cloaked beings announced themselves by their appearance. The bird-headed beings announced themselves by their wings and the height of their heads above the doorways of the palace. But the human form Apkallu, the type that was bearded and wingless, the type you could not identify by looking. The texts do not document a specific departure. No moment when they walked back into the water. No moment when they ascended to heaven. No moment when the Bit Meseri ritual formally closed the connection. They are simply present. And then, not mentioned. The hybrid 4, Nungel Pirigaldum, Pirigalnumgal, Pirigalapsu, and Lunana, who was only 2/3 Apkallu, were banished back to the waters for their transgressions. But what the Scribd academic analysis of the Apkallu notes, drawing on the cuneiform record, is that one of them, Pirigalapsu, was killed with his own seal. Not banished. Killed. The third of the 4 hybrid Apkallu did not return to the Apsu. He was killed. While he was mortal enough to be killed. And the question the Era epic asks in present tense, is the question that the human form type was specifically designed to make unanswerable. Where are the 7 sages? The ones you could see, are documented. The one you could not. Is somewhere you have not thought to look. Enki sent 3 types. The first, you would see coming. Fish skin. Dual head. Human feet beneath a tail. The second, you would hear first. Wings. Bird head. Nearly 2 meters of presence that commanded your knees to the floor. The third. You would not notice. All 3 documented in the Bit Meseri cuneiform texts. In the Uruk list of kings and sages. In the Babyloniaca of Berossus. All 3 confirmed by Wigerman's 1992 monograph Mesopotamian Protective Spirits. All 3 present in the clay figurines excavated from beneath the floors of Assyrian palaces. After the flood, 4 hybrid beings appeared. Part human. Part Apkallu. One of them only 2/3 divine. They transgressed. They were banished or killed. And then, the first fully human advisors arrived. Gilgamesh was the first king to have had an entirely human advisor. The chain was complete. But the question the era epic asks, in present tense, has never been answered. Where are the 7 sages of the Apsu? 2 of the 3 types have documented locations. The third type, the one that looked like everyone else, the one placed at the head of your bed, is the one the tablets go quiet about. If this video opens something in you, subscribe to the Shadow Ancestral right now. Leave a comment, which of the 3 types do you find most disturbing, and why? Share this with someone who thinks the oldest record of civilization has nothing left to surprise them. Next week, we go to the tablet that describes what Enki told the 7 sages before he sent them through the door. What he instructed them to teach. What he told them to withhold. And the one piece of knowledge, documented in the cuneiform, that was given to no human being. Ever. The shadow has more to show you. 3 types were sent. Only one looked like you. And only one was never documented leaving.